Today I'm going to show you how I made a grill cupcake cake. Come join me. I started out several days in advance with making some of the toppers for this cake. Started here making 3 different shades of yellow fondant because I'm going to make some corn on the cob. I divided this into 3 different sections. In the first section I added additional food coloring. In the center, I left that as it was. And in the third, I added some white. So ultimately, it ended up having 3 different shades. After I had 3 different shades, I made these little teardrop shaped pieces of fondant. And then I will cut the bottom of each of these to make it flat so that they look like little kernels of corn. Once I cut those bottom pieces off, I started to stick them to a round cylinder of fondant to make the core of the corn on the cob. I used some water on a paintbrush to help hold, to stick the pieces of corn kernels onto this cylinder piece. This is what that looked like. And then I just stuck them on in lines the whole way around this cob. And you see I'm alternating the colors. There's some darker ones, some lighter ones, just so it looks more natural, because on a piece of corn on the cob there are multiple colors of corn. As you can see, it's starting to look like corn on the cob. And here's what they look like. I made 2 cobs. Now moving on to make some hamburger patties. So I'm mixing some brown food coloring into my fondant. I'm just kind of taking a ball of fondant and flattening it out like a hamburger patty. And I'm going to do the same thing to this second one. Once I had those finished, I took some lemon extract and some brown paint, and I used that to kind of paint on some texture onto these burgers so that they're not all one solid color, because a real hamburger is not one solid color, but a multiple mix of them. And here's what they look like. Then I moved on to adding some cheese to these. So here I am rolling out some yellow fondant, and I'm going to cut these down into squares so that there's a piece of cheese on each one of these burgers. And I use a little bit of water, and I am going to just apply that with a brush, and then I put this piece of fondant on top, and it looks like a piece of cheese on this burger. I pushed down the sides a little bit so it looked like it is melted onto the burger. Here I'm just wiping some of the excess powdered sugar off of the burger. And now again, I'm using some water and I'm going to stick this piece of yellow fondant on the top to look like cheese. And so far, here's what the two burgers look like along with the corn on the cob. Now moving on to making some sausages. So I've taken some brown fondant and I'm just shaping it into the shape of sausages. Now I'm taking some paint and some red paint and I'm kind of painting over top of each of these sausages and rubbing it in a bit to add some texture. And then I'm going to cover the entirety of these sausages in red so that they look like they're cooked already on the grill. Here I'm adding a little bit of yellow to this and some yellow and red. And this ultimately is going to give it that shiny cooked look that we see on sausages on the grill. Here I've taken some black paint and I'm drawing some grill marks onto it. Once it's on, I'm going to take a paper towel and dab it so that some of it comes off. And that's really because I don't want it to be so consistent that you can't tell that it's real. So this, when you think about a sausage on a real grill, it's kind of not really just straight lines. So that's just add a little bit dimension. Here I've begun to work on some beef cubes that I'm going to put onto some skewers. I'm taking brown fondant and I'm going to cut that into 4 pieces so that I have 4 pieces of like beef cubes. Once I have those cut, I am rounding out those edges a little bit so they're not so sharp. And now I've taken some red paint, food coloring, and I am again kind of coloring over top of those beef cubes to add some dimension and multiple colors to the beef cubes. Here I am adding some Tylose powder to both some red and orange and yellow fondant. Here I'm going to be making some peppers, some yellow peppers and orange peppers. So I added that Tylose powder to help them dry harder because I'm going to curve these to look more like peppers that you would actually use. So I'm kind of pushing around each of the edges so that they're rounded instead of so sharp of a square. And I'm also using my knuckle to kind of push that in to add that curve that exists on peppers. And that Tylose powder will help hold that shape. Now that I have those shaped, I'm beginning to move on to a purple or red onion. And I'm cutting these into strips, and I'm going to layer them on top of each other. That's really because onions do come in layers. So I've now put 3 on top of each other. I'm going to cut these down into smaller pieces, and then that's how we will get around that. Once I have them all cut, I'm going back and I'm using a purple paint, edible paint of course, and I am drawing some lines on each of these pieces of red onion, and that is really to kind of keep that look of there being multiple layers to this. Now I've moved on and I'm making some mushrooms for all my skewers. Just kind of took a cap and cut the top part to see what the rounded would look like it. And then I'm freehanding these stems. I'm using my fondant tools and X-Acto knife to really finish shaping this in a way that's going to make people know it is a mushroom. After I got done these, I went back and I used some brown paint and I started to paint some of the elements. So here I'm painting a mushroom, and that's really just to, again, give some dimension so that this doesn't look all just solid colors. See, I also did the same thing with the peppers, painting some brown onto those to make them look cooked. Here I am beginning to move on to adding items to the skewer. I'm alternating between the different elements that I have. I have peppers and beef cubes and mushrooms and onions. Here I am taking some piping gel and I'm adding it onto the skewer stick, and that way this will just hold each one of those elements into place. And here's what they look like after completed. And here's all the items that we just made for on the top of the grill. Now that I have that done, I'm actually working on the cupcakes. This is going to be cupcake cake. So I'm doing some vanilla batter. I'm also going to do some chocolate batter. I'm going to fill up the cupcake pan with liners, and then add some batter to each one of those liners. With those in, I'm beginning to add the vanilla batter to each one of the cupcake papers. And with the vanilla completed, I'm moving on to chocolate batter. And with the chocolate ones finished, they're baked, they're cold. I'm beginning to add these to my cake board. I'm going to alternate these. I'm adding both chocolate and vanilla to this board. It ultimately ends up being 34 cupcakes for this cupcake cake. And now that I have these added, I'm just kind of shaping these up so that they are closer together and in place. Now I'm going to begin kind of sticking them to this board. I'm going to use a drop of buttercream underneath each one of the cupcakes before putting it back down. This will help hold them into place. With them all stuck down, again, I'm kind of pushing them together to make sure that they are all secured together. Here I'm beginning to cover in the areas that are blank in between the cupcakes. I'm just going to put some buttercream, and that'll help keep it from being pushed underneath of the cupcakes. Now I'm going around the entire cupcake cake so that I can make sure that I get each of the outside edges of the cupcakes covered. Going back through and adding buttercream wherever there needed to be buttercream to make this cake come together. Here I am just now going back through and I'm spreading all of that buttercream that I added to this to smooth it down so I can begin to decorate this cupcake cake. This doesn't have to be super smooth because it will be covered completely. Here I'm rolling out some gray fondant. I am planning on making an edge around the top of this to look like a grill. So I'm using a ribbon cutter and I'm cutting some strips that I will lay end to end around the outside of this cake. Now I'm beginning to make the briquettes underneath the grill. I'm doing them in multiple colors, in gray, white, black, and red. And that's really so that it looks kind of the way a real grill looks. Although it certainly won't look exact. But ultimately I'm trying to make it look like some of the stones are more burnt, some of them are red hot, some of them are more white. So here I'm just kind of shaping some of these briquettes up. Here's the white ones. And now I'm going to just kind of start laying them randomly, and then I'll begin with Really kind of placing them so that they're not touching the same color right beside each other. Now I'm going around the edge that I placed and just kind of using a little bit of Crisco to shine it up a bit and take away any of that excess powdered sugar that is currently on the edges. I'm adding here a bit of gray luster dust to the top of this. Again, this is to kind of give it that ashy look that happens when you burn briquettes. I'm using a small paintbrush to rub it in or brush it into each one of the briquettes. With that finished, I'm using an extruder so that I can make the grill plate or the grill grate that goes on top. So I'm using these pieces of fondant from the extruder to lay across those briquettes underneath. With those now in place, I'm beginning to add those elements to the top of the grill, the piece of sausage, the cheeseburgers, the corn on the cob, and also the skewers. Then I'm doing a little bit of rearranging to how I thought it might look a little better. And this is our final look of our grill. Thank you so much for coming to join me today. I encourage you to like, comment, share, engage with this video. I appreciate you coming. It was super fun cake to make. Thank you so much for joining me and have a fabulous, fabulous day.